Hi, everyone, and welcome along to the Ergonomically Speaking podcast, the podcast that aims to help you reduce and even eliminate work related discomfort. I am your host, Neve Pentney of Boyne Ergonomics. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that you're able to take away some useful practical advice from this podcast to help you reduce your own risk of discomfort at the workplace or help manage the risks among the people that you might be responsible for. So, now that we know why we're here, let's get started. Hello, and welcome along to another episode of the Ergonomically Speaking podcast, where today I'm going to be talking to you about workplace considerations for employees with epilepsy. Now, you might be wondering how epilepsy fits in with ergonomics, but if you remember, ergonomics is all about adjusting and adapting and fitting the workplace to the employee or to the user. And where I normally encounter epilepsy in my work is when somebody has been off work sick for a little while. Maybe they've been diagnosed with epilepsy while they were off sick, so it's a new diagnosis. But the employee feels well and healthy and they want to come back to work. And usually in this instance, they're still trying to figure out the medication and the side effects. They're still maybe trying to identify triggers, but they want to come back. So I would work with the employer to make sure that the workplace is as safe as it can be for the employee to be there while they adapt to this new diagnosis. So, what is epilepsy? Well, epilepsy is a term for a group of neurological conditions that are characterized by the occurrence of seizures. So, seizures are sudden bursts of electrical activity in the brain, and they can range. They're not all the one you kind of think of where the person might lose consciousness and have uncontrollable spasms. They can range from somebody being alert but kind of staring off into the distance, right up to a loss of consciousness and those spasms. So there is a spectrum there with seizures. It's not the same in everybody. It's reported that 1 in 5 people will experience a single seizure at some point in their lifetime. The medications can be used to control the seizures, but it takes time to find the right medication and the right dosage and try and manage side effects if there are any. In Ireland, it's estimated that there's 37,000 people over the age of 5 living with epilepsy, and it can be diagnosed at any stage of life. So, this is very important to remember. This is why I encounter people with what I call the adult diagnosed epilepsy. It can be diagnosed at any stage. Whether or not a person's diagnosis of epilepsy might impact their ability to carry out their work task pretty much depends on, well, the frequency of their seizures, any triggers, the role they have, potential safety impact of having a seizure while carrying out that task. So, what I want to do in this episode is to just outline the basic health and safety and ergonomic considerations for an office based employee that's been diagnosed with epilepsy. What can you, as an employer, do to make it a safer place for them to work in? Well, the first thing we need to do is you need to have an understanding of the diagnosis. As I said, the epilepsy is an umbrella term, so we need to kind of understand what it means for the individual. So it's an umbrella term. It's for a wide range of symptoms and conditions, and it's important that the employee and the employer is aware as much as they can be of the types and frequencies of seizures, any known triggers, any warning signs that they might be about to have a seizure, any medication required, and any potential side effects of that medication. And therefore, what accommodations do they need? Or do they have any associated musculoskeletal issues present? So there's a lot to think about. Now, the employee may not be comfortable disclosing everything with the employer, and that's okay. But they might not feel it's relevant in some cases. If this is the case, though, I always recommend that the employee meets with the occupational health provider, the occupational health physician, and have that discussion there. And then the physician can make a decision of actually and help you decide what needs to be disclosed, if anything. But it is important that if there is going to be an impact on the workplace, if there are triggers in the workplace, if it might affect how you do your job, that you let your employer know. Because if your employer doesn't know, well, then they can't make the adaptations that you might need. So that's usually the starting point. What we do next, it would look to see if we can assess any potential workplace triggers. So potential triggers you might see in the workplace would be stress, lighting, the computer screen, temperature, flickers of lights, and fatigue. So being aware of these potential triggers and putting in place accommodations and changes to reduce the occurrence of these triggers well, then you're going to reduce the risk of the employee experiencing a seizure in the workplace. It's recommended that a review of the employee's role is complete to make sure that they find the workload manageable, that they are not working alone, that they are not working shifts that might negatively impact their medication or increase the risk of a seizure. Um, if it's been less than a year since their last seizure, then they shouldn't be driving for their role. Make sure they're getting enough breaks, and there is a trained first aider on site in the instance of a seizure. So I'd always make sure that there's a trained first aider on site when the person is on site. The next thing to do is to develop a seizure care plan. So the employee and the employer do this together. Your plan should cover what are your requirements during and after a seizure. This includes maybe how much time you've noticed it takes you to recover, and where you might prefer to have that recovery, what level of supervision you need during your recovery, and how to identify if you actually need further care, like if you need emergency care or if we need to contact somebody. And a suitable area should be identified for recovery, such as like your first aid room, your break room, a rest area, somewhere that they can comfortably recover. The next thing to do is to put together a seizure care pack. So the employee and yourself should put together a pack that contains everything they might need in the event of a seizure, such as your care plan, a breathable pillow, a blanket, a change of clothes, and any medication you might need. And this should be stored in a safe locker. So this should be somewhere safe. The person should know where it is, and the nominated first aider or HR person who might be their contact should know where it is. Both should have a key so that it can be accessed very quickly if needed. So this is very important. You need your seizure care pack just in the off chance you do experience a seizure in work, that you have everything that you need, and that the person there in work knows what you need and knows where to get it. The next thing I would do is request an ergonomic risk assessment. So this would be bringing in someone like myself to make sure that the work area does not present an increased risk of seizure or injury in the event of a seizure. So factors you would think about there is posture, the type of monitor, the position of your monitor, any glare that might be on it, the lighting in the work area, the type of seating provided, the ability to take breaks from the screen, potential head injury risks in the area, and the available free space around the workstation. So, employees with epilepsy should be provided with a high quality computer monitor with a refresh rate of at least 60 hertz. The monitor should be fitted with an anti glare screen and positioned at least 30 centimeters from their seated position. So, arm's length, put the hand out in front of you. Ensure the workplace is well lit, but where we can, we want to avoid fluorescent lighting. Fluorescent lighting is quite harsh and generally sometimes it comes with a flicker. So, you want to avoid that. The workstation seat itself should be a high back chair with armrests and a headrest and a braking system. In the event of a sudden movement, the chair is not going to go flying with the person. And a wireless headset should be provided to allow for frequent breaks from the screen when they're on calls. And add padding to any hard edges or any sharp corners so that if they do experience a seizure in the workplace, well, they're not going to injure themselves if they bang their head off the table. Something to be considered. Another thing we need to think about is workplace assistance. So, based on the nature of the employee's epilepsy, it could be useful to have a buddy system in place or provide the employee maybe with a fall alarm around their neck to basically reduce the response time in the event of a seizure. You should also look to reduce the need for the employee to use stairs and stairwells, isolated stairwells, and with their consent, of course, it might be useful that their immediate colleagues are aware and know what to do in the event of a seizure. But that is obviously with the employee's consent. We also look at workplace facilities. So make sure the employee has access to an accessible toilet. And this is to make sure that, for example, the bathroom has more space, has access to an alarm, and the door can be opened from the outside in case they have a seizure there and we need to get to them. And the final thing to consider then is your personal evacuation plan. So make sure that any employee that has epilepsy or a range of other conditions has a personal evacuation plan that needs to be implemented in the event of an emergency. So this will identify their nearest exits, any assistance that's required, how they're going to reach the main exit, and any assistance that they might need when they're outside. So this is things that you would discuss with the employee, with your OC health provider, and with yourselves, the employer, to make sure that the work area is safe, that the work office is safe, and the employees can come back and start to move on and settle in to the diagnosis and get on with their lives. Many employees with the epilepsy, they don't really need a huge amount of accommodations and can continue to be absolutely productive and excel like any other employee. But implementing some of these steps, if you need them, or all of them if you need them, make sure that you as an employer have safeguarded their health and safety and that the employee can be confident that they are safe in the workplace. So, those are the workplace accommodations that you will consider for an employee with epilepsy. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found it useful. As always, I'll put all my social media details in the show notes. I will also put the link to the blog post on this episode in the show notes if you're looking for it. If you found it useful, please pass it on to a friend, let them know, maybe give a review, a like, or subscribe if you can. And until next time, stay well, and I will talk to you soon.